Hey everyone, so welcome back. I hope you had a great weekend and we're ready for a new week with some new calculations. Oops, sorry. So the first problem all week long is going to be focusing on either decimals or whole number addition. Okay, so I have 34 and 8 tenths plus 7 and 81 hundredths. So the first thing that we talk about is to do an estimate. Okay, so above it, I took the 34 and the 8 tenths and I kind of rounded that to 35. And then I did the 7 and 81 hundredths. And this would round to 8, but I don't want to actually do that calculation to think about it. So I just rounded it up to 10. So when I do 35 plus 10, I'm going to be around, so I'm going to do these little lines. It's going to be around 45. Okay, so I know my answer, and I know because I rounded this way up. I know it's going to be less than that, but it should be fairly close. So remember, whenever we're adding or subtracting and we're talking about decimals, we need to line up our decimals. So I rewrote my problem and I put it going this way, right? So this goes on top, this goes on the bottom. I had this when I have my 0.8 tenths and I have something in the hundreds here, I added a 0 on that part. So that should be a review, okay? And then we're going to bring down our decimal, okay? Oops, I don't think you can see. Okay. And then we're going to start on the right. 0 plus 1 is 1. 8 plus 8 is 16. So I'm going to put my 6 and I carry my 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 plus 7 is 12. So I put my 2, I carry my 1, and I end up with 42 and 61 hundredths, which is less than 45, but close to it. So I know my answer is correct and makes sense. Okay, so my next one's going to focus on the same thing how we talked about. So we're going to have our subtraction of decimals or whole numbers. And if you notice, these are going to be some multi-digit. So I have 879 and 1 tenth minus 72 and 8 tenths. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is do an estimate. Now remember, an estimate just gives me a good idea. Okay, so I'm going to round this one up to 880 because this was the 79. Again, this is what you could do so many different things, but for me, I'm just going to round it to here. And then my 72, I'm rounding down and I'm going to go to the 70s because I know when I'm on this, I'm just looking here in the tens. And when I have 880 minus 70, it's just going to affect this. So I'm going to have 110 left and I still have my 800 left. So that's going to give me around 810. Remember, I know I rounded up here. I rounded down here for that. So this is not exact, but it should be in this area. Okay, so now I'm going to actually rewrite my problem. Okay, when I rewrite my problem, remember I'm going to line up my decimals. And on this case, I don't really have to worry about it because they had the same number of decimal places. Okay, so I'm always going to start on the right. If I have 1, I cannot take 8 away. So I need to borrow. So I'm going to take away from my 9, make that an 8. Move this here. 11 minus 8 is 3. 8 minus 2 gives me 6. 7 minus 7 is 0. And 8 minus, there's nothing here, so I get 8. Right? So I have 806 and 3 tenths. So we know that it's going to be less than that, but close to it. So that makes sense. Okay, my next one we're going to focus on is talking about our fractions. And remember, whenever we have our fractions and we're adding or subtracting, we need a common denominator. That means my number on the bottom needs to be the same. Remember, because that's talking about the size of my pieces. Okay, so if I take a look at this, and the way I'm going to do that is to use my multiplication chart. I'm going to look for the least common multiple. Remember, the multiples are in the middle when you're looking on the chart. So when I look down the nines column, I want to find a number that is the same as when I look down fives column is on there. I'm going to tell you that when I look at this, and we can always just use the opposite. So if this is my 5, I'm going to take my 9 and do my numerator and my denominator by 5. And by the way, when I did my estimate, this is a little bit half of 4 9s, right? Or sorry, half of 9 is 4.5. So I don't quite have 1/2 here. And then I'm going to take away half of 2/5, or sorry, half of 5 is going to be 2.5. So I don't even have a half. So I have a close to a half, close to a half. So I'm taking close to a half, taking away close to a half. So I know my answer is going to be pretty close to 0 on this problem. Okay. So over here, I'm going to do that. And then on this side, I'm going to do times 9/9. And I'm doing that because I'm trying to use the opposite denominator on that. And remember, whatever I do to the numerator, I do to the denominator. Okay, so once I have that, then I'm going to do my multiplication. Anytime I'm working with fractions, I just multiply across the top, across the bottom. So 5 times 4 gives me 20, and that's over 45, minus 2 times 9 gives me 18 over 45. This is important because I want, sorry, I'm going to keep backing it up. I want my pieces to be the same size. Don't get freaked out by the size of this number here. And I also want to remind you, when we talked about fractions, the bigger the number on the bottom, my denominator, the smaller the size of the pieces, okay? Because I'm splitting it into like many pieces. Okay, so then once I have that, my 45, I'm going to see if I just tilt my camera down. My 45 stays the same. And then I'm just looking at that numerator, right? So I had 20 minus 18. I'm going to end up with 2. And I know when I look at this, I have a 5 in the ones, which tells me that this is not an even number. Right? 2 is going to be an even number. So 2 is a factor. 2 is not going to be a whole number factor of 45. If I divide each of these by 2, I end up with 22.5 on this. So this is going to be my lowest terms. Okay, so my last problem for today, right, is talking about division. And remember, all the problems for this week will follow the same pattern. And I know that these are tough, guys. That's why we're working on them, okay? So I'm taking my 765 and I'm dividing it into groups of 9, or I can think of it as I'm taking 765 items and dividing it between 9 people, okay? So if I use that idea, I know when I make my estimate, right, if this was a 10, this would make this decimal move over and I have 76.5. So I know that my number is going to be more than 76 because this would be this way. Okay, so more than 76. So let's take a peek when we do the actual division. I'm going to start here. Division's the weird one. So I'm going to start with the 7. If I have 7, that's smaller than 9. So I cannot make any groups of 9 on that. So I have to move over here and I'm going to use this 76. My 76, when I look at my multiplication chart, I'm going to look at 9 and I'm going to go down that column. My multiple of 9, which is going to be listed in the column that comes closest to 76, is going to be 72. I'm going to write that underneath. And when I find my 72, when I look over to the side, that is 8 groups. Okay, so this was my divide. Let me put that here. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. Remember, this is the cycle we keep going through. I divided up 76 into groups of 9, and I multiplied 9 times 8, and I got 72. Okay, then I'm going to subtract. Stop with the glare. I'm going to subtract. I'm going to start on the right when I subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. Remember, in order for that to be the right number of groups up here, this number here needs to be less than that number over here, okay? So I have my 4, and then my B means bring down. So I'm going to bring my 5 down here. And 45 is a multiple of 9. I know that. I can also think of the clock, right? So I know this is 5. 9 times 5 is 45. So I have 0 left. So my final answer should be 8. Oops, sorry, I'm knocking it all over, everybody. My final answer should be 85. Okay, how'd you do? I hope you did well. Let me know if you have questions.